From the John Navita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network. And now, here's Jim and Rich.
Of the Armchair Experts, another hour of rumblings and ramblings. One armchair expert today, just me, Jim Leon. Rich Massaro is off somewhere, I don't know. I think he's just turning into a bum lately who just doesn't want to work. So it's just me and John DeVita in the other room, spinning the dials, making sure I stay focused, stay behaved. John, how you doing today?
I am doing wonderful, Jim. I'm doing very good. Okay. Can't wait for tonight where we can be over at Ridgewood together.
We got another basketball game
another big game tonight.
Yeah, Glenbard South, I believe it is tonight. So it should be a fun night of basketball. A game we're going to be on TV, so I guess we have to be presentable tonight as best as we can. I don't know, John. You know, you made a comment a few minutes ago about all the weather and all the snow we're having, and it's going to be like Labor Day before you get your Christmas decorations down.
Boy, I tell you, I can't believe it's. What I'm afraid is that the Easter Bunny is going to be greeting Santa Claus out in front of my house pretty soon.
It could be. You know what really has been bothering me? What's really been bugging me lately is all these, and I guess it's just in the day that we're in of all the social media and all the things that people post. Tammy Souza from Channel 32 and Tom Skilling post all their weather information, and they post all these models that may happen. And all these models that may happen for a week from now, when they were saying we could have 2 more feet of snow by next Wednesday or by next Saturday. And that was going to be for the storm from over the weekend and the storm on Tuesday, and then what we're going to have now. You know, maybe today they're talking the worst of it's going to go south, maybe 6 to 10 inches south, and we may get 3-4 inches. I don't know. I wish they'd stop the panicking.
Yes.
You know, geez.
And you know, the best part of it is this is the first year since I lived here in this house here that we've had this much snow.
Yeah.
So what I did is I brought my snowblower from Wisconsin, from Elkhorn here. And the thing's been sitting in the garage because I can't get it started.
It never fails.
No, that's for sure.
It never fails. Well, we've got a few things we're going to talk about today. We got a bunch of stuff we can get into. We can get into football and some baseball and in fact, I've even got something around here. The Olympics start this week, so I mean, we can get into a little talk about the Olympics. Did you watch Super Bowl?
No, I didn't.
No, yeah, you didn't miss anything.
No. I'm not a football fan, to be honest with you, Jim. I mean, I'll root for the Bears, but basically speaking, my hobby, or my sport, I should say, is the Blackhawks hockey. I love the Blackhawks.
Good game last night.
Yeah.
Good game last night.
Yeah, though I didn't get a chance to see it because I've been doing some work here in the studios, but I heard from what I was listening to the radio this morning. They said it was a pretty good game.
Good game. Finally got righted. Had to win a game in regulation because they certainly seem to have a problem winning in overtime. Bulls were also out on the coast yesterday, and they were in Sacramento, while the Hawks were in L.A. and there was some. They got blown out in Sacramento, and Joakim Noah got tossed out of the game, and apparently let the refs know let all the refs know exactly what he thought of them as he walked off the court. So I'm sure that's going to cost him some money, and it's going to cost him a game or two.
And I bet you they hit the mute button on the microphones too.
I believe there was I believe it was a fork you, and fork you too, all the way through. Mm-hmm. Well, I got to tell you, if you didn't watch the game Sunday, John, you really didn't miss much. Maybe a few good commercials, and even then they were kind of. In this day of wacky, wide-open offenses that the NFL seems to be pushing to be able to have more interest in there, we had a game with the number one offense and versus the number one defense, and a game that I think a lot of people were looking forward to. And the game was going off at about a 2-point spread. Denver was a 2-point favorite. 1 point, I think Seattle was a 2-point favorite. But the game went off at 2 points, and it wound up being just an absolute disaster for Denver as Seattle beat them 43-8. Geez, I mean, I just did not expect that. Things got off badly for the Broncos right from the first play. When Manning went up to the line of scrimmage to call a play, and the center snapped the ball early and went over his head. Noshan Moreno fell on it, and it was a safety. And I think that was about that. The game was pretty much over right then. I was on my way out to my friend's house to watch the game, and I missed the first few minutes. And when I walked in the front door of their house, it was 5-0, and I'm going. Man. 5-0. How did this happen? He says safety on the first play, and then they got the ball back in a field goal.
What was the final score?
43-8.
Yeah, that's it. 43-8. Yeah, what a blowout.
43-8. When you score 8 points, a lot of things don't go right, but a lot of things go wrong in a win too. But not everything went wrong in this loss, but a lot of things did. Denver's third down defense was absolutely horrible, but that's really not why the Broncos lost the game. A kick return touchdown was bad, but that really wasn't the problem. What went wrong with the Broncos? One of the things that made them the team that they were this year, it was a very effective passing offense, and it just got shut down by the number one defense in the league, Seattle. So I guess we come back to the old adage. What can still win a ball game? I guess an effective defense is still the key. A lot of people are talking about Peyton Manning needing this game to solidify his legacy in the game, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit after we get into some things, because I looked on some websites and I found some interesting statistics that I don't think Peyton Manning needs to have another Super Bowl victory to cement his legacy as one of the greatest players ever to play the position or to play the game. But you know what? Manning threw 2 interceptions and lost a fumble, and you turn over the ball 3 times against a good team, and that's usually a recipe for a disaster, and that's really what happened to the Broncos. The offensive line and the wide receivers were terrible today. Manning could have been better simply by avoiding the turnovers. Manning could have easily taken more sacks. The Seahawks got to him only once, but they hurried him and they just nailed him all night. The Broncos could have played the field position game while they tried to figure things out a little bit better, but he was forcing a lot of throws in against a great defense, and it really cost the Broncos. If he got a little bit more conservative while his team got used to Seattle's breakneck defensive speed, they might have gotten a chance. But I got to tell you, putting the loss on Manning completely is unfair. His supporting cast needs to be more productive, and one of the things that really was a problem was his offensive line. Just absolutely struggled all night. Orlando Franklin had a terrible night just trying to block the Seattle defensive end, Cliff Averill. And the pressure that Averill put on really led to two of those interceptions, or both those interceptions. In fact, I'm just laughing here. I was flipping through some things, and I see somebody posted on Twitter that said my Twitter block button is having a better blocking night than Orlando Franklin is. And what can you do then to slow down a pass rush? Your alternative then is to just run the ball, and that really was harder and harder to do when you fall behind. So the Broncos really had themselves a small hole dug right at the start of the game. If the Seahawks had to guard against the run, they couldn't really pin their ears back and try to get to Manning. Knowshon Moreno, Monte Ball, and C.J. Anderson averaged 2.1 yards per carry on 13 carries. I mean, you fell behind early. What do you wind up doing? You're going to have to throw the ball. And that was the problem. Denver fell behind. They had to pass. I mean, you look at this. I mean, Peyton Manning set a Super Bowl record for most completions in a game. But what did he have to do? He had to pass every time. His receivers were productive, but you know what? They just couldn't do it. Demaryius Thomas, Wes Welker, Eric Decker, Julius Thomas were doing, when they're doing well, Manning can get the ball out of his hands quickly. When that happens, pass protection is not the issue, nor is the running game. When the line faltered, Manning was unwilling to take a sack, and you know what? I think he should have. Decker had the hardest assignment. He drew the Richard Sherman, the Seattle defensive back, and all he could manage to do was one pass for 6 yards. I got a kick out of seeing something during the week with Richard Sherman. I don't know if you saw this on a clip on this on TV at all, John. You know, Richard Sherman was the guy who had such a rant after the NFC title game that everybody, he went off into this Mr. T rant about Michael Crabtree. But Richard Sherman is a very intelligent, very well-spoken, actually quite a funny guy when you listen to him. And there was a clip with him from an appearance on Fox Sports. Excuse me, let me take a sip of John's coffee that he so kindly provided me. But there was a clip of him when he was on with Fox Sports Network, their cable network, and he was on their NFL show. And they talked a little bit about a game. They talked about a game they played against New England. And during the game, Sherman made a point of saying, Tom Brady has this reputation of Mr. Clean, Mr. Wonderful. But Tom Brady is quite a trash talker. Tom Brady, during a game, you don't see anything, but when the camera's off, he said, and they're going to a TV timeout and they're running commercials and there's no camera on the field, Tom Brady chirps a lot. Sherman told a story that he came up to him and one of his teammates. It may have been Cam Chancellor. I can't remember who he was talking about for sure. And the two, Sherman and Chancellor, were talking about coverage or what something was going on the game. And Brady came walking up to them and pointed up and looked at them. And he goes, and who are you guys again? Who are you? And they both looked at him like he was amazed. And Brady pointed up at the scoreboard. At that time, New England was leading the ball game, and said, "You guys come see me after this victory." So as it turned out, Seattle won the ball game. And Sherman said, well, he told me to come see him after the game. He said, I went up to see him after the game, and he wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't look at me. So I looked at him, and he goes, he said, you told me to come up to you. You're not talking to me. You mad, bro? So with that, Richard Sherman now has a T-shirt that he's selling at RichardSherman25.com with the Seattle colors, and you hold it up and it says, "You mad, bro?" So I like Richard Sherman, and it was kind of funny. I made a comment at the end. I made a comment. I can't remember if I said that the last time we were on, or if I said it during the week when Rich and I were doing basketball. That I said I thought it would be funny if you think back to the first Super Bowl. One defensive back who was chirping a lot during that game was Kansas City, Fred the Hammer Williamson, and Fred the Hammer Williamson got taken off on a stretcher during the game. Richard Sherman didn't finish the game because he hurt his ankle and had to be taken off. But I got to tell you, it was really a disappointing game. My gosh, Seattle got themselves up quick. It was a minute left in the first quarter. Manning threw a critical interception to Cam Chancellor. but Seattle was dominating. Manning, it looked like at one point was going to get going, but Manning was hit by throwing. The ball went straight up into the air. Malcolm Smith took it back 69 yards for a touchdown. It was 22-0 at that point, and the game was over. The game was really over. And the commercials themselves were just kind of disappointing. I mean, the one that I thought was really good and really cute, and it had been released on the internet and had gone viral during the week, was the Budweiser commercial with the dog and the horse. Did you see that at all? Oh, it was really well done. A little golden retriever puppy would trot next door to the farm and the barn where the Clydesdales were, and he made friends with one of the Clydesdales, and the barn owner would pick the dog up and take him back to the puppy place, and then the next day he comes in again, and it's in the rain, and he trots in and goes up to his friend, and they take him back, and then the final scene is you see the dog being sold to someone, and he's in the back seat of the car, and he sees his friend and he sees the horse out in the field and starts to bark, and the horse chases after the car. The guy who's bought the dog looks in the rear window and sees the horse chasing after him, and looks up at the front, and all the other Clydesdales are now running down the road towards him, and they block the car in. And the final scene is the dog leading all the horses back to the barn.
Oh, boy. Yeah, Budweiser always does have real nice commercials.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
very pleasant, entertaining commercials.
Yeah, I looked at that and I said, I can't believe I'm getting all weepy over a beer commercial.
Yeah. I was out there in St. Louis, and I saw all those facilities out there. And they have a real good PR department, too, that really comes up with... Their commercials are soothing. Some of them are so aggravating because I don't want to mention any of them. But anyways, when I sit with my sister up in Wisconsin and we watch television, and some of the commercials that they have are it's time to get up and go check to see if the lake rose any.
And see if the grass grew.
Needs,
see if the grass grew
but,
or something like that.
I always do enjoy Budweiser commercials, Jim, because they're very entertaining and they're very clean. I mean, there's no indecency about their commercials.
Yeah. It was funny when that was posted during the week and started to go viral. And I watched it, and I got a little weepy when I'm looking at that, because basically I'm a big mushball anyhow, no matter what it is.
So am I.
Yeah, and I had to laugh because I'm flipping through my feed on Facebook, and Nick DiGilio, who does overnights on WGN, posts, I can't believe I'm weeping over a beer. I'm getting weepy over a beer commercial.
I get very sentimental myself.
I know.
Very, 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 very
I
do.
know.
Yeah.
Well, we got through another football season, and a lot of people were talking about Peyton Manning. Oh, Peyton Manning needs this victory to cement his legacy is there, and you know what? I don't think so. You think about the career Peyton Manning has had at the age of 36, and I looked last night on just a few of the critical things that you would judge a quarterback on. And as far as Peyton Manning's career, age 36, Peyton Manning, passer rating, second overall in the history of the league at 97.2. Aaron Rodgers is first at 104.9. But you look at some of the players along the way. Here, we go to career passes completed. Brett Favre is number one at 6,300. Peyton Manning is number two, 5,532 passes completed. Through the 2013 season, Dan Marino is third. Passing yards leaders, Brett Favre, 71,838. Number two, Peyton Manning, 64,964. Touchdowns, career passing touchdowns, Brett Favre, 508. Peyton Manning, 491. If he comes back next year, as he's expected to, I'm sure that's going to be the first record he's going to go after. I know he wants that. But you know what? Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. Who's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Dan Marino. That didn't affect him. I think we're going to see Peyton Manning whenever he retires. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame. There were some great players. I forgot to pull the list down on the Hall of Fame this year, but I know there were some great players selected for the Hall of Fame. With a couple of names that come to mind immediately: Michael Strahan from the Giants, Ray Guy. Ray Guy was selected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. For those of you who might not be old enough to remember Ray Guy played in 60s and 70s, I think, probably more in the 70s, as a punter for Oakland, for the Raiders. And he may have been the first punter ever selected in the first round of the NFL draft. So to be the first punter to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, where he's strictly that's an honor for special teamers. Ray Guy is in his mid-60s now. So, geez, that's used to sound so old to me, and now I just, I don't know. But for him to be selected as a Pro Football Hall of Famer, that's quite an honor. There were some others. Derek Brooks, I think, was also selected. So that was really really good. That was really good to see. Now, it was interesting too. There was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of concern with the fact that the Super Bowl was going to be in a cold weather city and not in a domed stadium. There was a lot of concern about the way the weather was going to be, and it actually turned out to be a pretty decent day. Even the commissioner of the National Football League sat outside. He said he was not going to sit in a private box. He was going to sit outside. So
with the fans.
He was going to sit with the fans,
yeah.
And there was a picture of him out there. But now you have the people saying, since at one point in time, the NFL had a rule about a 50-degree minimum average temperature for that date that the Super Bowl would be scheduled. They waived that just to give the East Rutherford, New Jersey, with the home of the Jets, the Giants and the Jets, the opportunity to host a game. Okay, why did they do that? First of all, the Giants and the Jets were very smart. When they built their new stadium, how many seats did they put into it? 82,550 seats.
Wow.
That's a big place. That's a big place to fill. Now, people are starting to say, well, if they could do it in a cold weather city, how come the Bears don't have the opportunity? Here's one reason. What's the capacity of Soldier Field? 61,500 seats. That's too small. That's too small. You're not going to see that. You have to think about one thing here, too. Tickets to the Super Bowl this year ranged from $500 to $2,500 face value. Face value.
How many tickets did you buy?
I bought one. I bought a parking space. I made more money on the parking space.
$2,500. My God.
$2,500. You know what was interesting too? Dana and I were thinking right around New Year's, and I've talked about this on the air. Dana being a Michigan State fan and a Michigan State grad, we talked about the possibility of going to Pasadena for the Rose Bowl, and then we started to price out the options and go. Face value for a Rose Bowl ticket was $185. Face value, and I was seeing them out on the internet for $400, something like that a piece. And actually, if we would have had a little bit more money, there were two seats in a private box, which also meant food coming with it, that we could have had two seats for $1,000. But it was just hard to pull the trigger when you start to think you got to have a hotel, you got to have, and we're starting to talk then, you're starting to figure out, what's this going to come to? Well, this comes out to about $3,000 a person. And maybe it would have put me in a better mood considering the way the weather has been this year, because this has just been too hard. But you know what?
And I guarantee you one thing, Jim. Out there in Pasadena, you go to rent a motel room, and they up the price because it's the event. Yeah.
There were a couple of places actually we had looked at over near. Actually, it might have been over near LAX, the airport, that were a little bit more reasonable. We could get them in the. There were some rooms available in the $80 to about $120 a night range. which, all things considered, considering L.A.
Yeah.
and considering the event, the time of year, that wasn't too bad. But you know what? We go in here, and people are saying, people are saying, well, Chicago should host this, but you know what? It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. This is the second smallest outdoor NFL stadium. The smallest ones is currently the whatever they're calling the Coliseum in Los Angeles, O.CO, which keeps reducing its size to avoid empty seats and league-mandated TV blackouts. At some point in time, you got to think that Oakland's going to get out of that stadium. I know San Francisco is going to. The next 3 years, the Super Bowl will be held in Glendale, Arizona, the San Francisco area, because the 49ers are moving into a new stadium, and Houston. Houston's a beautiful stadium. That'd be a great place. 3 contenders in 2018: Indianapolis, Minneapolis. Now, Minneapolis, the Vikings' new stadium, is going to be an outdoor stadium. Can you imagine that? If we get a winter like this one, playing up there, whew, man.
What about out there in Green Bay, Lambert Field?
Lambeau Field. I mean, it's a great size, but that's another thing that's going to be.
But you know, Jim.
That would be wouldn't that be a great place for a football?
Oh boy,
Super Bowl game.
This area would go crazy.
Yeah, and then watch the Packers get into it.
Yeah, you know though, Jim, it should make no difference where they play because football is a wintertime sport. You know, so I mean, like they were talking about having the Super Bowl this year out there. Where was it? In what state was that in?
New Jersey.
New Jersey. That's right. Yeah, but I mean, football is a wintertime sport. So regardless of what the weather is, or
it's a colder weather sport.
That's right. Yeah, it's not like
fall.
It's not like a baseball game.
Right.
You know, where everybody goes in short sleeves. You know.
Right. You know, the other location that they're talking about as a contender for 2018 is New Orleans. There have been some great Super Bowls, and that's a great place. Certainly the greatest Super Bowl ever played. Super Bowl XX was held in New Orleans. Bears 46, Patriots 10. That was a great ball game. But you know what? It's not going to happen in Chicago. I mean, we built the stadium wrong here. I mean, I still think it looks like a big old toilet bowl. The way they dropped that stadium in the middle of it and kept the outer part, the columns from Soldier Field. I mean, they're iconic, but
yeah, Jim. But Soldiers Field was not built for a football field, was it? When it was,
you know what? The original configuration of Soldier Field, and it's singular, soldier, not soldiers.
Yeah,
Soldier Field was two long bleacher seating areas or whatever. The original configuration, the stadium seated over 100,000, and it was a very odd place because you had the track around it. There used to be, as my parents told me, there used to be auto racing at Soldier Field at one point in time, and my parents told me about during the war, during World War II fundraisers, where they would have the war exercises and things and entertainment in Soldier Field.
Well, I tell you, Jim, the Chicago Fire Department used to have a lot of programs at Soldiers Field. I can't think of the name of them now, but they had all kinds of entertainment at. What was Soldiers Field built to be originally? I mean, what was their main?
You know what? I think it wound up originally. It was supposed to be some field on the lake with the idea of athletic events, and I can't think of what the original name of it was. I want to say it may have been when it was built in the 20s. It may have been City Field or something like that. It did host. I'm looking at the clock. We got about a minute? Okay. It did host one of the most famous. You go back and look at the history there. It hosted one of the most famous heavyweight title fights in the history of the sports, the Dempsey-Tunney long count fight. That was hosted. That was at Soldier Field, and that drew 103,000, 110,000 people. So I mean the park has great history. There was a huge crowd for a city title game back in the 30s. Austin High. My dad told me about that one. My dad was an Austin High graduate. And he told me about that one. Let's take a station break, and we'll be right back.
You are listening to Armchair Experts on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network from the John Navita Broadcast Center. And now, back to Jim and Rich.
And we are back. You know, when they renovated Soldier Field back in 2000. Well, actually, when the Bears moved there, when they left Wrigley Field, when the league mandated Wrigley Field, had to have them move from Wrigley Field because the minimum stadium size, I think back then, was required that you had to have at least 50,000 seats for football, and you could not get 50,000 seats at Wrigley Field. Even when they put up the temporary bleachers, it was just a shade under 50,000. So they moved to Soldier Field and actually closed off the one end of Soldier Field. When the old man, Hallis, brought the bleachers that they used to put up over the right field bleachers at Wrigley Field to increase the capacity. They brought the bleachers to Soldier Field, put them up, cut off one end of the field, and made it about a 67,000 seat stadium. When they renovated it, what came out of it was 61,500 seats. They've got a lot of boxes, which is what they were looking for, really. But I mean, you know, they talk about the concrete columns, which was nostalgic for some people who remembered, you know, tractor pulls and track meets that were held back there. But it was made basically for the Bears. I mean, you look at it from the outside, it looks totally strange. On the inside, it's a nice looking park. I've been there a couple of times. The only thing I've been there for is a couple of concerts. I saw the Rolling Stones there twice. And it's beautiful on the inside, but outside, you look at that, I just keep seeing that's a big old toilet bowl.
Yes, my sister calls it. My sister said she went past there, and she said it looks like a spaceship.
Yeah, it's such an odd thing, but I don't know.
I was only in the Soldiers Field, I think, once or twice. I was there. I can't think of the event that the Chicago Fire Department used to have over there. And then once my business partner Bob Holmes and I, we went to a football game there. So I was in Soldiers Field twice in my life.
Yeah, there used to be some great games there. There was the College Football All-Star game.
Mm-hmm, yep.
College Football All-Star game there for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was also every year that the Bears would play one of their exhibition games there, and it would be the Armed Forces game.
That's when I went there.
I was going to say, it wasn't that one of them?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was, Jim.
Yeah, and that was under the old configuration of the park.
Mm-hmm.
Before they closed off the one end. Now, when they renovated the ballpark a number of years ago, essentially they tore down the other half of the park.
Mm-hmm.
That used to be where the if I remember right, that was the park district offices at the other end of the park. And for a while, in that area that was not used for football, when the Bears put that up, I seem to remember they had some sort of softball tournament there one time back in the 70s. But as far as us seeing a Super Bowl here with the consideration of the stadium, we've got not going to happen. Not going to happen. What do we get into now? You know, now that we've got football out of the way, now that we've got the important things of football out of the way, now we get into the real important things, the college football drafts. And that's going to be there's going to be a lot of things coming out over the next few weeks because the draft is not going to be held until early in May. I think it's a little bit later, so there's going to be more speculation. And we have to start looking at what the needs are for each team, and certainly look at the needs for the Bears. And obviously, with the way the defense was this past season, defense is going to be a big issue and a big part of the draft. And I've been looking at some early mock drafts with some profiles of some players. One of them that we've looked at here, that I've looked at, picks Rashid Hagman, a defensive tackle from Minnesota that would be available to the Bears when they pick at number 14. 6'6", 311 pounds. Great size, great athleticism, great burst off the line. He can play nose tackle or 3 technique, and he could even play the 5 technique in a 3-4 defense. Safeties, Deion Bailey, second round, from USC. He would be a great choice too. The combination, the safety play this year for the Bears was just horrible. Major Wright and Chris Conte struggled no matter what. They couldn't do anything against the run. They could not do anything against the pass. And you know what? With the inconsistency of the defensive line, that only hampered them all the more. Wright's set to become a free agent this season, and we're not sure if we're going to see him in a Bears uniform. But Conte is still signed through the 2014 season, so there has to be a need to address a safety position either through free agency or the draft. And Deion Bailey may be a great choice. Another choice at cornerback, E.J. Gaines from Missouri. You've got Tim Jennings locked up for the next 4 years, but obviously Charles Tillman's an issue. Tillman being 33 years old, coming off injuries. He might, we may see him, it's very possible you could see him go to Tampa, although Charles Tillman claims that he will, no matter what, retire as a Chicago Bear. So I'm guessing either A, if nobody picks him up, he's going to announce his retirement, or if he does go to Tampa, as many people are assuming now that Lovie Smith is the head coach at Tampa, it could be one of those, he comes back to Chicago, signs a one-day contract so he can officially retire as a Chicago Bear. Some other choices to think about as cornerbacks, but they will be in the probably go through the first two rounds. Darqueze Dennard from Michigan State is a great cornerback. My gosh, early on in the year when Michigan State was having a hard time getting their offense running, Darqueze Dennard had more touchdowns in the first 2 games than the Michigan State offense had scored. Justin Gilbert's another choice, but E.J. Gaines has had a really good and reliable career at Missouri. He's very good in man coverage. He hasn't really gotten a lot of interceptions in his career in his college career, but he very rarely gives up the big play. He can step up and plays well against the run. And despite not having elite speed, he can do a nice job staying with his man up the field. Another player to consider in the 4th round, Aaron Lynch, a defensive end from South Florida. You've got to consider Henry Melton coming off injuries. Nate Collins, Jeremiah Ratliff, Corey Wooten are all set to become free agents. Out of those names, I'd certainly love to see Jeremiah Ratliff re-signed. Henry Melton coming off injuries, and well, if he wants to stay here, I would expect to see him take a pay cut. But if you start to look at some other people, you got to start thinking about somebody like Aaron Lynch. It's been a little bit difficult for his career. He was originally at Notre Dame as a freshman, but he transferred to South Florida to be a little bit closer to his family. He sat out his sophomore year due to the NCAA rules, but he didn't really have the best junior year, but he did opt to declare for the 2014 draft. Great speed, plays well against the run. He might be a little bit over-aggressive as he tends to get flagged for dumb penalties, but there might be some value there, certainly at a 4th-round pick. DeAndre Coleman in the 5th round could be a good choice for the Bears, a defensive tackle out of California. In 2013, the Bears were dead last against the run, and they averaged over 161 yards a game, allowing that. That's 30 yards more than the next worst team. Injuries to Melton and Collins didn't help, but they really didn't have reliable tackles in the middle there to help there. And DeAndre Coleman might be. It might be a good choice. 2 picks they have in the 6th round. This is the first time we've seen anybody refer to anything as far as the offense. Colt Lyerla, a tight end from Oregon, might be a good choice. There's some. He's kind of built like the new hybrid tight ends that are becoming more the norm, and he's kind of built similar to Evan Rodriguez. Now, hopefully he doesn't have the same off the field issues as Evan Rodriguez had, but he could be a good choice as a tight end selection. And this last one is one of my favorites because I've seen him for the last couple of years going up at Michigan State. Max Bulla. Inside linebacker at Michigan State. He had, even though he was suspended for the Rose Bowl, and we really don't know why he was suspended for the Rose Bowl. He's had a good career. He might be a great choice, and there's certainly there's certainly value there at the 6th round because he will slip down. It'll be interesting to see how the Bears handle their the middle linebacker position versus free agency. DJ Williams could come back in 2014, but certainly they have to address some of the depth issues. And while Bulla can struggle against the pass, he's the type of player that can really excel on first and second downs, and could really be a contributor immediately on the on special teams. As we look at some other choices that people are looking at as far as first-round picks for the Bears, it's kind of interesting too, as everybody's going to have their own choice, and I guess as we progress towards May, we'll see how consistent people might come. Aaron Donald from Pitt, a defensive tackle, could be available in the first round. A real classic 3-technique tackle, great quickness, great pass rush. Tools, exactly what the Bears lacked in 2013. And if they do decide to re-sign Melton, you've got a cornerback who might be available, as I mentioned before, Darqueze Dennard, or a defensive end in kind of the mold of Trent Murphy. There's always an issue of how long it's going to take a football player to prove themselves as far as a first-round draft pick. And I was kind of surprised when I read today, you know what, it's about a 50-50 chance, and it's a 50-50 chance they make it in the league, and I guess this'll be a good draft to see because the Bears have to address so many needs on their defense. We'll see how well they do it. Another one to consider is a free safety, Clinton Dix. How did I miss that name for the all-name team this year, John? Clinton Dix. His name is actually Haseen. So I guess it just became a nickname. So he was Clinton Dix. That's a thought that he could be a great choice for the Bears in the first round. Everybody else has rattled off their things early on back in January. We've got one draft showing Jadeveon Clowney being the number 1 pick in the draft to Houston. St. Louis Rams, Jake Matthews, the number 2 pick. Anthony Barr, a linebacker to Jacksonville, number 3. Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel, number 4 pick to Cleveland. Teddy Bridgewater, number 5. Now I'm seeing a lot of I've been seeing some projections lately that Teddy Bridgewater from Louisville, the quarterback from Louisville, could actually wind up being the first player taken in the draft. We get down on this particular projection, number 14, Tim Jernigan, defensive tackle from Florida State. On talent alone, Jernigan should be a top 10 pick. Unfortunately, defensive tackles have a tendency of falling later in drafts, and it's really not a sexy pick to make, but the Bears need some help at that position. So it should be fun. We get into the season now where football is finally over, and then we start talking about drafts, so it should be fun to see what happens. Baseball is going to start up. Pitchers and catchers report. Let's see, a week from Thursday. I'm getting excited about this now. I can't wait for another 97-loss season. Jeez. You know, a lot of talk recently. Certainly with some of the off-season signings, and there was certainly a lot of talk, especially when we heard that the Cubs and White Sox both made a big pitch for Masaharu Tanaka, the Japanese pitcher the Japanese right-hander who had such a great career in Japan and was signed by the Yankees for $155 million. $155 million, a 7-year contract. He can opt out after 4 years. Now, there's 150, and he's never pitched in the majors. John, that's amazing.
Jim, do you think that they're really worth that much money?
No.
Some of these sports players, regardless of what sport it is, the football, baseball, basketball, some of these players make more money than the president of the United States does.
And they've had better years. That was the old joke. That was the joke when back in the 20s when Babe Ruth was signed for $100,000 a year, which was unheard of back then. And a reporter said, you make more than the president, than President Hoover. And you know what Ruth's response was? I had a better year than him.
But you have a player on your team that makes that kind of money. Now I know my nephew Mark has 4 boys, and one year he took them to watch a baseball game. I think it was the White Sox. He says, by the time he says I paid to go in the place, buy everybody what they wanted, food, concession stands, and parking, he said it was almost $400.
Yep.
And when you hear that they're paying a guy this kind of money, well, where's that money coming from? It's coming from the tickets. It's coming from the concession stands.
As long as people are buying the tickets.
And and really, I wouldn't do it myself.
I haven't been to a major. I'll admit I haven't been to a major league game in a couple of years. Some of it just because of the tickets. Some of it's time. You want to go, but somehow you just never manage to do it. You start to look for things like half price night at a Sox game on a Monday night.
Yeah.
You go for that.
Yeah.
You go to a minor league game. I went to a minor league game this summer, a couple of minor league games this summer. Actually, it was nice. We went to a game in Joliet, an independent league game. We sat down in the front row. $10.
Okay, the old Comiskey Park. I was there once in my life. The new Comiskey Park, or Cellular Field, whatever they call that now, I've never been there. Okay, now, I've been to Wrigley Field many times.
Sure.
Because I grew up at Addison and Oakley.
Okay.
And my buddies and I used to walk right down Addison Street, right to Wrigley Field.
Sure.
The last time I was in Wrigley Field, Joe Gentile, God rest his soul,
yes, indeed.
he used to take and treat the graduating class of St. Ignatius High School to a day at Wrigley Field, and then he would throw out the first ball.
Good for him. Joe was a great guy.
Oh yes, he sure was.
I was fortunate to meet him a couple of times. Always a great guy.
And I miss him dearly.
Yeah, great man.
And he always would say to me, he would always tell me ahead of time that this particular day he was throwing out the ball, and he would want me to drive him to Wrigley Field, and Oscar, who's with me, we would go. I would take and drive from here back to the studios. Park my truck in the parking lot, get him in his car, and then I would drive to Wrigley Field. And I had to call a certain person. As soon as we got close to Wrigley Field, they took the car and parked it, and he went up, out on the field to throw out the first ball. And Oscar and I, we sat right behind the Cub dugout. And of course, now that he's not here no more, I haven't been to Wrigley Field since. But every year for about 5 years straight, we were there in April.
I'll tell you, the last 3 times I've been to Wrigley Field. No, the last 2 times I've been to Wrigley Field. Paul McCartney, Bruce Springsteen. That's it.
Yeah.
I had been to the playoffs when the Cubs made the playoffs a couple of years ago, and they were absolutely 2 of the worst games I've ever seen in my life.
Yes, I agree.
They were horrible.
Yep.
And it was. I still remember one. We're sitting there and it's late in the game. It was the game against Arizona when they got eliminated. whatever year that was. And
Was that still in this century?
yeah, yeah. They got beat by Arizona and got eliminated in 3 straight. And one guy was sitting about several rows, and I got to tell you, I'm embarrassed to say, I paid for 2 seats. I went through a scalper. I bought him off eBay. I probably paid over $500 for him. Because I thought, this is a good team. This could be it. And they were just horrible. But there was some guy who stood up in the 7th inning and started to, "Come on, Cubs, let's go, Cubs." And everybody was just sitting there, and he turns around and looks at everyone. We were in the upper deck. And he turns around, "What's the matter with all you people? What kind of Cub fans are you? Why don't you stand up and cheer?" And I heard from behind me, and I never did spot who had said it. I just heard this female voice go, "Dude, sit down." It's over, dude. And he starts going again, "Come on. And she just a little loud, "Dude, sit down. This one's over."
Yep, that's right.
This one's over. And it was just terrible, the effort. But now when you start to think about this, here is a guy unproven. Great career in Japan. Great career in Japan. He was 24 he was 24-0 last year. Didn't lose a ball game. He had a 1.27 ERA. He struck out 183 batters in 212 innings and only gave up 168 hits. But here's an interesting thing about this pitcher. Everybody's talking about him. Oh my God, 155 million. He's going to do this. And it was interesting that the Yankees went after him, because the initial comment was, now that the old man is dead, George Steinbrenner is gone, and his family is running it, they did not want to really get themselves in a position where they had to pay the luxury tax. But then again, the Yankees didn't make the playoffs last year. So now we've got some concern. So what happened? So they decided to go after him for this. But here's an interesting thing. In the Yankees, in retrospect, after you look at the records of this young man, maybe did the major leagues a favor by picking up this guy and having to deal with this, because this guy may be only 25 years old, but he's pitched 7 years in the Japanese Professional League. He's got 1,315 innings on that 25-year-old arm. I did a little bit of the analytics. He's facing about 35 batters per game. And you know what? No matter what, unless he's really, really unusual, there's only a finite number of innings in an arm before it breaks down. I think that's being proven very much now. And it's, it was not unusual for him to go 7-8 innings every time he went out there. I think I figured out that over his career, every time he's walked out onto the field, he's averaged at least 7.5 innings. So at some point in time, this guy's going to break down.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe maybe the Yankees did everybody a favor on this one. I don't know. You talk about another thing. You talked about the players, what they make over here. Here was one that was kind of an interesting thing, and I heard this the other day on the radio when the announcement was made about this guy. And they made a comment about it, and I had to go look it up too myself, just out of curiosity. Michael Young retired recently, and Michael Young's had a decent career. Michael Young played for the Rangers, a lot of years for the Rangers. He also finished off with the Dodgers and the Phillies. Actually, with the Phillies, he was traded to the Phillies, traded or free agent, I can't remember. He was traded by Texas to the Phillies in 2012. But he had a decent career. He's retired. He decided to retire to spend more time with his family. 37 years old. 14 years in the majors. 300 hitter. 185 home runs. Decent career, But what was interesting is you never hear him talking about him in relation to the Hall of Fame. But if you look at baseballreference.com, they talk about similar players with his statistics, and the top 10 players that are most similar to him. Ray Durham played with the White Sox. Joe Torre played Cardinals and that. B.J. Suroff played for the Brewers most of his career. Alan Trammell, great career for many years with the Tigers. Barry Larkin, Ryne Sandberg, Marty McManus. That must have been somebody, I don't know that name. Bobby Doerr, played back in the 30s and 40s with the Red Sox. Buddy Bell had a good career. Billy Herman played back in the 30s and 40s with the Cubs. Torrey, Larkin, Sandberg, Bobby Doerr, Billy Herman, all in the Hall of Fame. Now, granted, Torrey made it in the Hall of Fame as a manager, but still, there's a Hall of Famer. I don't necessarily think of Michael Herman or Michael Young being a Hall of Fame candidate, but he certainly did. You talk about salaries. You know what, Michael Young? I think Michael Young doesn't really have to worry about much of anything over his career. You know how much he made? Almost $91 million.
Oh, my God.
Playing baseball. Hard to believe.
Yes.
Hard to believe. We've got a lot of other things going on here. As I'm looking, and I don't know if I want to get too much into this. Maybe next time when Rich and I are together, we can talk a little bit more about spring training and some other things and some prospects, because certainly I think as a Cub fan, all we're going to have to be doing this year is looking at prospects and hoping for the best.
I was just going to ask you, what are the predictions for our Chicago teams, the White Sox and the Cubs?
Cubs, I got to think you're looking at another 95 losses this year. But you know what? You're going to start to see some of the benefits of the farm system. You're going to start to see some of that this year, because I think you're going to see Javier Baez up at some point in time this year. They're very high on the kid that they drafted last year, Chris Bryant. He just tore up the fall leagues, and he's got great power. He's a third baseman. He's a third baseman by trade, but a lot of people think his position is not really going to be third base. He's going to be a corner outfielder. I don't know if you're going to see him this year, but you may honestly see him rushed in next year. Other people you're going to see probably within the next couple of years. You're going to see Albert Almora. I looked forward to seeing him last year. I went to a game out in Kane County when he was there, but unfortunately he was injured. A lot of people say he's ready right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're going to see it. Jorge Soler. He might be. He's another one that we'll probably see in 15. C.J. Edwards, a lot of people say there's your stud pitcher. There's your stud starter, C.J. Edwards. But honestly, I think we'll talk about this a little bit more next time. The White Sox have had a good offseason with some of their signings. They lost 99 games this year. A lot of people, they're not projected to win anything in the Central, but you may see them improve 10 to 12 games. I can't see this. I really, with the pitching, I can't see the Cubs doing much this year. Honestly, another 95 losses.
Oh, well, Jim, there's always next year.
I know. We want to leave you with one thing here, as we've got a couple of minutes left. I got a kick out of this a couple of weeks ago when I found it. Seattle signed the Mariners signed Robinson Cano. Was a big signing, but they also happened to sign a cousin of his, whose name was Burt Reynolds. Burt Reynolds. So, you start to think about it, and I was starting to go through this, but somebody beat me to it. You start to think about ball players who may have had some famous names that were also in there. Well, we have Carlos Santana. He's a catcher and a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. George Scott played first base and was also a pretty good actor. Patton. Matthew Broderick played only 2 games for the Brooklyn Superbas in 1903, but he was also Ferris Bueller later on. John Dowd, he got his name when he investigated Pete Rose. Jim Morrison. Well, I remember Jim Morrison being the lead singer for the Doors, but he was also a third baseman, played for the White Sox too. Bruce Campbell. Well, you may not remember him unless you were a fan of horror movies, but He was the Texas Chainsaw Killer. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Davy Jones. Who else? He was the monkey. Eddie Murphy. Beverly Hills Cop. Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels. He only played one season for the Boston Braves in 1952. But he was only there because he brought the liquor. Do you know what his nickname was? Sour Mash Jack. Russ Meyer was one of the starting pitchers, but he was also known as a filmmaker. He won 17 games for the Phillies, but really never duplicated that success at any of his other stops in the big leagues. His impact was in the movies, where he became known as the king of the nudies. He used campy humor, sly satire, and large-breasted women. His most famous works include Faster Pussycat, Kill Kill, and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And you know who wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls? Roger Ebert.
Oh, my God.
Anytime Roger Ebert criticized anybody about a script, all they had to do was remind him of the fact that I didn't write Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Hey, that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Armchair Expert. Thanks to John DeVita for helping me along today. We appreciated you listening to us. We will catch you the next time. Thanks for listening, and have a good one, everybody.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita, edited by Stephen Lehman. Our audio engineer is James Rohde, and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Coordinator is John Chiconda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, February the 4th, the year 2014. Be safe, and thanks for listening.